Natural Selection 2, an old game that you probably never heard of until recently. This is a real oldie, originally released in October of 2012, so what's caused a sudden resurgence, and is this game even relevant anymore in 2020? If you like this content, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons to make sure you're alerted for future videos. I played the original for a few years before Natural Selection 2's release, a multiplayer, real-time strategy game over top of a first-person shooter done right. I loved this game, and I played the heck out of it for hours every day. When Natural Selection 2 released, I was hooked and was super excited for its release. I played it just as much as the original and have still played it periodically throughout the years. Suddenly, however, this game has resurfaced in sales with major updates. This has left a lot of people wondering what's changed and if it's even worth spending money on an 8-year-old game. A logical question. Natural Selection 2 pits the Marines, known as frontiersmen, against an alien menace, the Koda. Players on both sides operate under the respective commanders, which adds an interesting dynamic to the game. I've seen several games try this before, and either the commander just ends up being unessential or is incorporated in such a weird way that it just doesn't feel right. This game manages to get it right by making the commander so essential that you can't even play the game without one. What's great about this concept is that instead of controlling AI units, you now have real players, with real personalities, and real strengths and weaknesses. You'll need to notice these little quirks on top of the strategies in order to succeed. It also makes it far more interesting as a soldier on the field working under a real player whose role is as essential as yours is. We'll come back to the role of the commander in just a bit, but let's explain the gameplay first itself. The Marines have ranged weaponry, but are mainly slow and clunky. The aliens, on the other hand, are mainly melee focused with fast movement speeds and agility being their strengths. The main premise of the game is territory control. The maps feature multiple ways to progress through it and flank or cut off your opponents. Each map features several resource nodes that require the commanders to place resource nodes on top of them in order to get resource points. These resource points then accumulate for the commander to purchase other structures and buy upgrades, as well as giving a small gain to each player's player resources. Players use these resources to buy better weapons, or evolutions in the case of aliens, to make them more combat effective. Lastly, there are several claimable command areas where Marine command chairs and alien hives can be placed. The more hives the aliens have, the more powerful they become, so it's in the Marines' best interest to stop the aliens from gaining new hives. The objective is to destroy all of your enemies' command chairs or hives, or force them to surrender. Despite this, the majority of the combat and strategy centers around the resource nodes. This is where the territory control part of the game comes in. This can get kind of old and predictable after some time, as well as being annoying when you repeatedly keep losing the same resource node over and over. Given all this, it might seem that the game would be really Marine biased, as they can just pick off aliens down a long hallway. The maps, however, work hard to work against that. They feature many hard corners with lots of places for the aliens to hide, large rooms for them to crawl around the ceilings and hide, as well as ventilation shafts to crawl through and flank around that long corridor with the Marines standing at the end. The game includes a full tutorial for both sides, teaching you everything from the basics all the way to commanding the battle. It's very well done, and the pace feels quite appropriate. While you might be able to fumble your way through other games, the tutorial should be considered mandatory for this game, otherwise you'll incur the wrath of your teammates. And this brings us to a good point worth mentioning, the community. The game is full of long-standing, elite players that can be quite unwelcoming to new players. I feel that this revolves around the way the ranking system works more than it has to do with players just being aggravated by the typical new player shortcomings. We'll get more onto the ranking system a little bit later, but fortunately, the salty veterans seem to be heavily diluted by new players. For the most part, they stick to their elite minimum rank required servers, so you shouldn't run into too many of them. I attempted to contact the game developers to ask them a few questions about their vision for the future of the game and why revamp an old game instead of making a new one. Nobody ever replied to me, so I'm not able to provide a factual answer, unfortunately. My best guess is that since it's easier just to work on an existing platform and that the game already has a solid base. They use their own source code to begin with, and all the resources are already in place, so it seems logical to me. I have heard through the grapevine that they are testing the waters to see if there is enough interest in the game to develop a new one. Again, this is all hearsay, so please just take this with a grain of salt, but it seems believable to me. The game has also just aged very well, and it still looks pretty darn good given its age. There have been some major changes to the game's balance and gameplay in general, so updating an existing platform seems like the right move. I will say, as a long-standing natural selection player, even though I've only played it periodically in recent times, the game is in a much better place than it was even a few years ago.
As aforementioned, both sides have a commander who operate from the traditional top-down RTS view. Both sides' commanders maintain similarities while having some slightly different spins. The Marine commander requires their Marines to build structures, the Alien commander does not. Aliens will usually have their players help defend and get them going regardless. The Marine team is slow and clunky, while the Aliens are fast and highly maneuverable. Marines can build very quickly, while Aliens build slowly, requiring structures to mature before becoming active and infestation to build on. No one Marine is able to build structures without the commander placing them first, while a certain alien class can build limited structures and help their commander build faster. These are just a few of the key differences between the two commanders. Team commanders mainly work with team resources, and only the commander has access to this. More resource nodes means the team's resources come in faster, and each player's individual resources build quicker too. This plays just like a traditional RTS game. Build structures, upgrade and fortify your position while generating a battle plan on the fly. The exception here is that each unit is a real player. It's a simple enough design, and it only takes a couple of playthroughs to understand the basics. The complexity comes from how it's applied into the strategy and working with real people. There is no one winning strategy, and each team is as different as your adversaries, so you need to be flexible.
Move out. Build structure and waypoint.
This team plays mostly like a traditional FPS, except now you're shooting fast-moving aliens. Not really a new concept, but most won't shoot back at you, and they want to get up close and personal to finish the job. This takes some getting used to, and you'll suck at it for a while, but once you get it, it's very gratifying. It's best to stay at range and cautiously move through the hard corners and big rooms, checking all the major spots the aliens can be waiting for you. It's also a good idea to group up with others and work together so you're not an easy target walking around alone. Each Marine starts with a basic rifle, a pistol, and a combat hatchet. Commander upgrades make these weapons and your armor more effective. Commander upgrades also allow players to purchase better weapons like shotguns, flamethrowers, mines, etc. All these will increase the team's combat effectiveness. Buying said items requires the aforementioned personal resources, and dying and losing a purchased weapon will set you back so you can't do it forever. Upon dying, a weapon drops to the ground and is able to be picked up again, but they degrade and disappear very quickly, so unless another Marine is nearby, you won't get back to it in time. Alien gorges can also make these weapons despawn quicker using Bile Bomb. Seems unfair, but this helps balance the game nicely, and losing a weapon is much cheaper than losing an evolved alien life form. Marines need to stay near the resource nodes as they are pushing to avoid being outmaneuvered and losing them. You'll start feeling like most of your gameplay will revolve around responding to attacks to resource nodes, but this isn't the only thing Marine gameplay has to offer. Phase gates allow immediate travel around the map, making the team more mobile. Later unlocked jetpacks also help with maneuverability and even out the maneuverability disparity. Exosuits can also be purchased, which are big tanks and do loads of damage and can soak up some hits. These will slow the team down but allow the Marines to break through stalemated, heavily defended areas. Heavily defended areas can also be tackled with the use of ARCs, a commander-built vehicle that's set up and can shoot through walls as long as the target is spotted. These can be used to eliminate defensive structures and alien hives in hard-to-push areas, allowing the Marines to simply cover the arcs and ease the difficulty of the push. With the exception of the final evolution for aliens, they trade hit points for speed and agility. They can see through the dark, and Marines appear as bright red, easy-to-spot targets and are highly sensitive to noise. The enemy Marines will sound like loud, clumsy oafs trotting around noisily, so it's very easy to know exactly where they are. They can use vents to sneak around and flank, as well as try to be crafty and set up ambushes. Aliens need to close the distance quickly to their adversaries, and trying to do such through long distances like a long corridor is usually a bad idea. Good players will know when it's time to sprint at full speed and when it's time to move slowly and silently. When to park and when to set up an ambush versus when to use their mobility. This playstyle isn't for everyone, but it's damn good fun. Commander upgrades allow players to apply upgrades to their life forms to make them stronger and offer a wider variety of options. There is something for every playstyle and can be changed to work within the overall strategy. Aliens start with the most basic life form, the Skulk, a fast-moving, kind of dog-like looking creature that can move along walls and roofs and move entirely silently when moving slow. Skulks have a powerful bite and can shoot a parasite at Marines from range. This will make them visible to all alien players, even through walls. Aliens can evolve into higher life forms using player resources. These include the Lurk, a flying nuisance with an even more powerful bite and low damage ranged attack. The Fade, which can move incredibly fast and deliver fast killing blows. And lastly, the Onos, a walking tank with a hugely powerful attack and stomp to knock down enemy Marines. The commander can place tunnels for quicker access around the map, kind of like the Marine phase gates. The difference, however, is that you enter one end of the tunnel, walk through it, and then exit the other side, so they're slower than a phase gate. The aliens are a powerful adversary, but can be blocked out by Marines using long corridors and covering their backs. It's also difficult to deal with well-coordinated Marines who have set up arcs and are defending them well. The best way to deal with these challenges is to stop them from occurring to begin with. Recognizing that the Marines are setting up for a strong push and interrupting them before they set it up will be your best friend. Because once the exosuits start rolling in and the arcs blasting through walls, things will start coming unglued very quickly. The game's ranking system is surrounded by contention amongst the player base. It's known as hive skill, or just quote-unquote ELO amongst players. It's quite the complex formula, and you can find it through a quick Google search, but essentially the system tracks how well you do, assigns you a rank based on how many skill points you have, and can be used to balance the game. Players can opt at the start of the game to shuffle the teams based on hive skill to make the game more fairly balanced. Seems like a great idea, right? Well, in practice it is, but it has several flaws. For one, you can lose skill points and get demoted, and the thing that decides if you gain or lose skill points is if your team wins or loses. So if you work your butt off, lead your team, and are incredibly helpful, but you just couldn't carry your team the distance and lose, you are judged harshly by the system and lose points. This is incredibly frustrating to deal with because it always feels like you take one step forward and 2 steps back. It doesn't accurately represent a player's skill, as a good or bad team can boost or drag their skill points around. Secondly, it can make teams appear balanced while not really being balanced. Some people are really good at both sides, but most players will have a preference and either be really good at one side while being kind of mediocre or okay at the other. While all the ranks and skills might be evenly distributed on paper, you might actually have a lot of high-ranking players on your team that are not very good at that side. The same is true for commanders. A high-level player can step into the command chair and lead people to believe that you're good to go when they might actually have very little commander time. The game does show commander hours if you hover over their rank in most servers, it's just not enough. I just feel this is a weak system and honestly sours the experience. Everybody wants to win, and while it might suck to lose, it's usually not that big of a deal in most games. You just start another one and go again. However, with this system, I get frustrated when I see the battle going the wrong way for us. It's added salt in the wound at the end after already losing, and then you have to watch your rank move backwards. I also feel this is the main reason a lot of the higher level players can be so toxic, because they work so hard to get there and they don't want to lose their rank. I'll leave it at that, but just know that it isn't just me that feels this way. I can't go a single game without hearing someone complain about it or a big discussion being formulated from it every couple of games. We're getting close to the final verdict now, hang in there. The things I feel the game does really well are RTS over FPS. This is done very well, and while many other games have tried to do this, Natural Selection 2 does it in just such a unique and entertaining way that it just works. It offers a little bit for a lot of people and gets you hooked. Sometimes this will delay the match start because nobody wants to command and then somebody gets roped into it. That aside, this is still a great gameplay mechanic. Human vs. Aliens multiplayer gameplay. This is usually quite bad in other games, and either gives one side a huge advantage and underdogging the other. That or they balance it by giving each strength a critical weakness that is easily countered. This game does neither. Each side has their own benefits and none of them make you invincible. It's the overarching strategy on top of player skill that decides if the match is won or lost. Small, tight-knit teams. This game is all about teamwork, and it takes a small squad-based strategy game to an entirely different level. Battles get heated, players get really into the game, and it's just an exhilarating thrill. I honestly haven't seen anything quite like this game, and given that it's 8 years old, that is saying something. Outcome predictability. At first, this game is fresh and new to you and you'll want to fight to the bitter end. With a bit of experience, you'll start to notice when you are falling behind and know that the odds are stacking against you. It eventually gets to the point that you will pretty well know who's going to win within the first 5 minutes. Sometimes you'll be surprised, and it's not to say that it always goes that way, it's just difficult to catch back up again when you fall behind. This can make the rest of the match seem like a chore. Force balance. Again, most players enjoy one side over the other. If you like playing Marines and are forced to the alien team for balance, it can feel like a chore. Server bottlenecks. Servers are currently the big bottleneck for the growing player base. It's not uncommon to log in and find that most populated servers are full and the only ones open have very few players. This is more of a growing pain than a development problem, so I don't hold it against them, it's just a nuisance. Whew, that was a long one, but we made it here together. This game might have its flaws, but many of the old ones have been fixed and the current ones are being worked on. Ignoring the weak ranking system and moody veterans, this is a great game and is still quite good even given its age. It's still a bit odd to me to see an old game being revived instead of releasing a new one, but I can understand it's easier to work with existing material than start over from scratch again. I rate this game 7 out of 10, good, and receives the Stealth Fox recommended by. I'd have honestly given it an 8 if it were not for the ranking system. I know this seems small, but it really does sour up the overall experience. Perhaps that will change in the future, and at that point I can confidently update my rating. I also docked a point because it's an old platform, just simply because it's not going to compete with modern games using modern source code and utilizing better technology. The devs are working hard to bring new maps, new features, and new balance to the game. It's in a much better state now than it ever was, and it looks very promising, so I'm still excited. Just remember, this game requires heavy teamwork and isn't the one you can mute voice chat in. If you're just looking to unwind and not have to work super close with other players, this might not be a good fit. A mic should be considered essential equipment to command, and at least having voice chat on to listen as non-commander. This game is also incredibly cheap, and at the time of this review is less than the cost of your average barista-style fancy cup of coffee. I'd say give it a go. At worst, you're out a couple of bucks and had to skip the daily coffee on one occasion. You'll likely run into me because I still actively play it because I just enjoy it that much. It's also always had a small place in my heart since I played the original and this game many years ago, and I'm so glad to see that it's back. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this content, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons to be alerted for future videos. I also stream on Twitch, and the link to my stream is linked down below in the description. That link will take you to my About page where my schedule is posted. Stay safe out there, everyone, and happy hunting.